Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. As we begin a new year, the Black Lives Matter movement continues in full force across the country in response to the fatal police shootings of several unarmed black boys and men. Locally, 35-year-old Kevin Matthews was the latest to die after being shot by a Dearborn police officer. However, the expression Black Lives Matter also represents a call to stop the alarming number of black-on-black crimes in our community. 2015 ended with the murder of 7-year-old Chanel Berry, who was shot while playing with Christmas presents inside her Detroit home. And talented musician Anthony Tolson was gunned down during a carjacking in a store parking lot. Joining me now are two people on the front lines of stopping the violence. Reverend David Bullock, founder of the Change Agent Consortium, and Brenda Hill, a member of the group Mothers of Murdered Children. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Let's start first with this, with the sort of tension that exists between the idea of black-on-black crime versus murders committed by police against African Americans. Some of the criticism of the Black Lives Matter movement is around the idea that, well, why are you focusing on what police do when black people kill each other every day in cities across America? And I get really frustrated and annoyed by those questions. But let's start by talking about why that's a false sort of dichotomy to set up, that it's not about an either or, it is about everything.
Indeed. Well, thanks for having us on the show. I get frustrated too. It's a false dichotomy. We have to confront brutality, period. And of course, police brutality comes with a history and a narrative. I mean, the lynching tree, lynching, the criminal justice system, the penal system as it relates to African Americans in America has, at least historically, been lopsided. And so the fight to make sure that police officers don't use lethal force in a wanton or excessive way against African Americans is a very legitimate battle cry.
Sure.
Now, at the same time, folks tend to maim, steal, and kill within the communities in which they live.
Right.
And so black-on-black crime
is not about people being black.
Right. It's really about where folks live.
You kill people that you know.
That you know, right. But at the same time, we don't think that on the one hand, you can be against police brutality and then not be upset when citizens are brutalizing each other as well. So, you know, it's stopping the use of lethal force when it's unjustified by anybody.
Right. Brenda, one of the other things that really bothers me about this discussion is people will say to me, life is cheap in the black community, and that's what is proven by all the murders that we see. And I always push back on that by saying, if you ever go to a community where a child in particular has been murdered, you will understand how not cheap that life was, and how valued that person was, and how much pain is felt by the people around them. I mean, there really is a disconnect between what people think happens and what really does happen.
But that's what the mainstream media says. With our group, we have mothers whose children are 50 to newborns that have died, have been murdered. And so the pain is real, the pain is the same. They're no less upset, trying to find justice, no matter what the age of the child is.
Yeah.
And so anyone who says that is really insensitive to the fact that no parent wants to bury their child, but no one wants to bury their child to murder, ever.
Yeah. And in Detroit, in cities like Detroit, this is an everyday kind of thing. I mean, this happens over and over and over again, and the despair that grows out of that repetitive nature of this is really concerning.
Well, I don't know if it's specific to Detroit, but we're talking about Detroit.
Sure.
But the despair the death is just the pebble. The ripple effect of that death, that murder, is what is harming our community.
Yeah.
From the fact that parents don't know what to do when they get that call, to the fact that a lot of these crimes aren't being solved. And with that, you know, a parent is wondering if the person in the grocery store is that guy.
Right.
You know, or if the people down the street know You know, so, and then where do they get help? 2 years out, 4 years out, 6 years out. That's what Mothers of Murdered Children is here for. But some people slip through the cracks. Some people never get any attention. And that's what we're here to change.
Yeah, yeah. Reverend Bullock, I know that you have been involved with some of the response to Kevin Matthews' killing right before Christmas. Talk about that instance and how it fits in the larger context of this discussion about lethal force on the part of the police.
Well, definitely, you know, and we pray for Kevin Matthews' family and continue to fight for justice in that case. But here you have a case of a young man who had mental challenges, mental health challenges, had an interaction with police the day before. It was petty larceny. Now, I don't know what that means, but it's Skittles, chips.
Right. All of the things, the trivial things that we have been told are somehow justification
for being killed by the police. And they saw him the next day and wanted to apprehend him. And of course, the Dearborn police have tasers. Police are trained in takedown methodology. But this police officer or those police officers decided to shoot him multiple times. And so that is excessive. And if this were just one case, you know, maybe people would be able to have, I guess, a calmer response to this. But, you know, we've seen across the country where law enforcement, when they interact with African-American males specifically, but even with Sandra Bland. I mean, when we see
the woman in Texas.
In Texas, when
sure.
we saw Sandra Bland, she was alive. She entered police custody and was no longer alive. Right. So something happened with law enforcement, and so Kevin Matthews becomes just another name on the list of folks that lost their life in the hands of trained people.
Right. People who we expect, people who we give weapons to because we expect that they will behave differently than other people. They have training and they are supposed to have some accountability for the way they use those weapons. Talk about the response that you've already gotten from the Dearborn police about what they plan to do and how soon and transparent that process might be.
Well, this is what's very interesting about police brutality, and for people who say, well, why does the Black Lives Matter movement focus on police brutality? Well, because police brutality is in part about police departments. It's about police protocols around the use of lethal force and their mental health training and diversity and interacting with communities, but it's also about the threshold of the law. And so the police chief obviously wants an investigation to be handled appropriately. Chief Craig, the Detroit Police Department, has taken on that investigation. But
because it happened
in Detroit, right? So they
even though it was
so the Dearborn police came into Detroit, right? And that raises all kind of questions about whether or not they were supposed to do that, if they were justified in doing that. But ultimately, this is going to end up on the desk of the county prosecutor, and the law favors police officers. All they have to say is, I felt threatened. Right, and we saw this in the Tamir Rice case, right?
With the 12-year-old.
With the 12-year-old in Cleveland, exactly, who became a thug, you know, and he didn't even have a real gun. Of course, Kevin Matthews did not have a gun at all.
He was unarmed, sure.
And so part of this conversation is, how do we change the public policy? You know, how do we lower that threshold so that we can actually get some convictions when law enforcement's wrong?
And I also think Dearborn is unique. Dearborn only has 6% African-American citizens in a city that's right across the street from Dearborn. But you can go to Westland from Detroit. And you can go to Westland, who's further away from Detroit, and they have 30% African-Americans. So
there's a history of relations between Dearborn and Detroit, black and white, that goes way back.
That's serious. That's really serious. There's a reason African-Americans don't want to live there, and there's a reason they're not allowed to live there.
Don't feel welcome
necessarily. And that's right across the street from Detroit. And then intimidate African Americans out of living there, but feel compelled to chase down the least of us. A person who's been known to have a mental illness, and chase him down and drag him into a backyard and shoot him down. You know, and those things harken back to the history of this country. And so we pay those officers. We talked to the chief. He said 70,000 African Americans come into Dearborn every day.
Right,
But
to shop and to
And
work.
shop down the street,
Yes.
Yeah, right.
you know, from where Kevin Matthews was killed. And not to cut Brenda off, but to interject, Kevin Matthews had a warrant in Redford.
Yes.
Right. So why not
Right.
call the
Call the
Redford
Redford
police
police
and have
and-
him
right.
picked up by them
Right.
and extradited?
And
right,
why
so-
are we putting mentally ill people on probation?
Well, right.
That sets them up to be criminalized.
That's a whole other
Yes,
issue that we
absolutely.
don't put money into resources to treat mentally ill people
Yes.
for their illnesses as opposed
But
to as criminals.
Dearborn stops 26 times more people, African Americans,
Yeah.
than white people. There's an issue. And so when you say someone who is given authority runs down one of the least of us
Right, right.
and shoots them and says, oh, I was scared. Well, your job means that you have to have conviction.
You aren't. You are
Yes.
supposed to be able to deal with that fear in a way that stops short of,
Well, both of
taking someone's
us,
life.
and I heard someone say this, both of us can't be scared.
Right.
And you get paid not to be scared.
Right, right.
You know, and
right.
or
or to handle that fear in a
different
professional manner.
Absolutely.
I wrote a column about in the Detroit Free Press about Tamir Rice a few weeks ago when the prosecutor there decided not to press charges against, or grand jury decided not to press charges against the officer. And I drew a connection between the lethal use of police force and the violence we see in black communities, and that the official sort of cheapening of black life, the official sanction of these incidents really does send a message into the black community that if you kill a black person, it's not the same as somebody else. It really does try to say to us that our lives don't matter.
You know what's powerful about that point? Symbolically, the official cheapening does send that message, but the official cheapening of black life is official too.
Right.
I mean, with
It is
respect to
official.
public education.
Right.
Yes.
You know, I remember when in school there was character development in school with respect to resources for folks living in poverty.
Right.
So when you talk about the cheapening of black life,
That's a much more systemic.
It's bigger than symbolic.
Yeah.
And the official cheapening, you know, just reeks in an institutional way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think we see the effects of that in our
And
community.
then how do you have that with your child, that conversation? You're having all the conversations trying to get them to adulthood.
Right.
But how do you have that conversation that you have to watch your
You
back
have to
on,
behave
with
differently.
police, and it may be your fault, and please get to school, and a mother begging their children, just please come home safe, whatever you have to do. And the person that's the big bad monster isn't the guy around the corner.
It
It's
may
the
be the
police.
police
It is the
officer.
police.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is. And every day, you know, they're having those conversations about the police saying you're a target and you've done nothing but be black.
Yeah. Well, we could continue this conversation for years. We'll keep tabs on what happens, though, with Kevin Matthews' death in Dearborn. And thank you both for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.